I had the privilege of being able to talk to the Defence Minister. Hope at the side when it comes to the government, the steel in their spine, none other than Peter Dutton a bit earlier today. Lots of different issues, but front and centre, the choice before Australians in just a few weeks.
Like any footy team or any team going out into a grand final, that's how you need to judge both sides. And it's not just about the leaders, and Scott Morrison's capabilities, his experience outstrips Anthony Albanese, so on any measure. But if you go line by line through the major portfolios otherwise, Paul, there's a huge difference. And I really do think people will start to focus in. I mean, you look at somebody like Chris Bowen, who presided over all of the tax policies, fundamentally within himself still believes in all of that, which Bill Shorten took to the last election. He would be arguing for those policies around the cabinet table in an Albanese government. And never forget that as Immigration Minister, as Border Protection Minister, he let in 398 boats. So I think if people do a match-up and you look at what is at risk if you vote in an Albanese government, not just in an economic sense, but in a national security sense, there are big problems coming and we need to be properly prepared for them as a country. And I just don't think Labor has any of those answers.
Well, let alone KK on the borders, but that's self-explanatory. Let's talk about China specifically. Yeah, correct. Speak specifically about China. Anthony Albanese, when he was getting the soft run at the press gallery, surprise, surprise, at the National Press Club, says, we need to stand up to them defensively, but they're also a really important trading partner. The Prime Minister, again, last night on the show made it very clear, well, you can't have all of everything. They have changed as a country since Labor was there last time. So do you agree with the PM that there would be some part of our economic relationship that Labor would be willing to trade away in order to get back into China's good books?
Well, Paul, I mean, you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, look at the words of Penny Wong. I mean, Penny Wong hedges her bets every time she speaks on this topic. Look at Tanya Plibersek. I mean, do you think that Tanya Plibersek would stand up for the national security interests of our country in the face of any adversary or of any threat? I mean, these people are as weak as water. And when you go to Mr Albanese, look, you know, I mean, he's making himself a small target. That's a well-known political strategy. But, Paul, people who have led the Labor Party over Anthony's 25 years in Parliament, none of them, not one, has seen fit to offer him an economic or national security portfolio. Not one. And he's never sought one out. He's never sat around the National Security Committee table. So when he says that he wouldn't have the stomach to stand up to the people smugglers, you believe him. Believe what he says, because he doesn't have the experience or the runs on the board or the capability to make the tough decisions. Brendan O'Connor, my opposite number, who would be the Defence Minister in an Albanese government, openly says that the biggest threat militarily for our country is climate change. Now, China's on a particular course with Taiwan. They're in conflict with the Indians on their land border. They're in conflict with Thailand. They're in conflict with the Vietnamese. The Japanese see China as an existential threat if they go into Taiwan. We know now that the PLA, the Navy within the Beijing government, they've got hundreds of vessels on the East China Sea butting up against the Coast Guard vessels of the Japanese. And we need to be very serious about this threat, and we need to have proper preparations in place. And I've been very clear in speaking on your program and elsewhere that we need to be in a position of strength, not weakness. And the Labor Party would bring a defined position of weakness to the table. They can't control our borders. They don't have, frankly, the guts to make the decisions required that Scott Morrison and I have made over the last few years to keep the boat stopped. And they certainly don't have the ability to stare down an adversary or to deal with bullies or others that might try and change our way of life. We need to stand up for our beliefs and our values more so than ever. And I don't believe in any circumstance the Albanese government could deliver that.
Now, just finally, obviously it was supposedly the uphill battle in 19. You and I both know that normal people hadn't really moved in the couple of years prior.
Correct.
There's a lot of noise that exists around now. Polls are slightly different, with it even smaller path, taller hill, all that garbage. But how do you push through the wall of noise that is the mainstream media, where it feels like, the great mistake they made in 2019 was by giving you guys an opportunity to actually get some free air. Instead, the modus operandi in 2022 is, scream, sook, moan, make as much noise as you possibly can, so you can't make the points that you've just made on this show.
Well, Paul, I just think we've got to extend out and talk directly to people in the suburbs and in the towns and in marginal seats where it's going to matter. And that's your audience. And we need to speak very frankly about what's at risk. There's no sense pretending that Clive Palmer or Craig Kelly or Pauline Hanson can be the Prime Minister of the country. All they can do, if you lodge a protest vote with them, is to give Anthony Albanese 1 or 2 seats closer to the finish line. So this is a 2-horse race between the Liberal Party and the National Party on the one hand, and the Labor Party on the other, between the Prime Minister and Mr Albanese, and that's what's at risk here. So we need to just be very clear and direct in our messaging, and I hope that all of us can continue to do that. But the media otherwise needs to ask the tough questions of Anthony Albanese and Brendan O'Connor, and Christina Keneally. And don't forget Tony Burke lurking in the background there. These people sat around the cabinet table when Labor was last in power. These people are the ones who devised the policies in the Rudd Gillard years. And we don't want a rerun of that for our country, particularly not when there are economic headwinds ahead of us. Clearly, inflation is going to be an issue, as we're seeing in the United States and in the United Kingdom. And they can't manage the economy. They've never been able to manage the economy, and they can't manage our borders nor our national security. And that's what's at stake. So I think we just stay on course. Every election I've been involved in, from having served under John Howard to this very day, the Liberal Party at one point, close to an election or a few months out, has been behind in the polls. And we've worked hard, and we've put forward a very compelling argument, as I think Scott Morrison will over the course of the next couple of months. And I think the polls will tighten. I think we'll be re-elected, but it's going to be tight. And we can't have people voting for minor parties or thinking that there's a protest vote and it won't matter. You'll end up with an Albanese Greens government, and that is not in the best interests of our country.